All right, welcome in to another episode of Carps Corner. Really appreciate you guys diving in here in the summer, mid-July, getting ready to get back into football season one more time. So right on this thing, right on schedule for where we want to and where we'd like to be. Great spot here for a football player. Camp's about a week away. Some of the NFL camps are going to be starting up here within the next 4 to 6 days. And it's a little bit of a nauseating feeling. Get that pit in your stomach. Excited about the season, but obviously then a little worried about the fact that, you're going to be pretty much working in football for the next 5.5 months. And training camp, you're going to be away from your wife, away from your kids. And that might sound nice at first, but I mean, it's lonely sitting there at night when all you're doing is studying. You wake up, practice, meetings, walkthroughs. And it used to be 2 practices a day. Now it's a little bit easier. So that maybe the physical toll, the physical grind isn't as bad, but just psychologically, it really begins to wear on you a little bit. And so, for guys as players, this is a time where, you're excited, but also, man, like you're looking around, like no vacations. Like this is it. Going to work, going to do something I love, really enjoy, but also like if someone's getting married, and there's funerals, which a lot of guys will take out for that. You have kids. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you ultimately have to miss for the game that you really love. So you get that pit going in your stomach because you know how hard training camp can be, how physical it's going to be as you get older. It's harder and harder to be able to continue to grind the same way that you did. And so as you sit there and stare at it, you're like, man, can I come out of training camp without any injuries? Can I not be crazy sore? As a veteran player, hopefully the coach will, give me some vet days here and there. Not play too much in the preseason and feel pretty good. I was never really afforded any of that with where I was age-wise and then how good I was, usually grinding and scrapping, especially the last couple of years to make teams. And so, yeah, it was tough. You're going out there every day and trying to get after it, but you love the competition and you crave it and you miss it when it's gone. So those guys starting up camp, enjoy, they're one more week of being able to work out, hang out, and try to enjoy yourself. Before ultimately you go off and you're going to be basically being deployed to the NFL for the next, hopefully till February, probably at least minimum till January. I got some great stuff today, some great Stanley Cup stories that I got to be a part of, some franchise tag news in the NFL, growth of the game as far as internationally. Troy Vince had some comments on that. And then some stuff that's ultimately coming out about NIL, stuff in SEC media days, a lot of things to really get to. Governor of California weighing in. Could UCLA, I mean, there'd be a hiccup with them joining the Big Ten. Could it not potentially happen? So something like that. And then I got some comments from Lane Kiffen at media days as well about NIL. And he's been really saying this stuff from the beginning. Want to start off, though, with some Stanley Cup stories. I'm going to throw this up here at the beginning. My man, Pat McAfee. I was talking to AJ about this, now how messed up I was. And when you get a chance to, do something you've never done before, and it's going to involve maybe some libations and a giant cup and a championship cup at that, and Lord Stanley's Cup, it was tremendous. And so Jack Johnson, as AJ's brother-in-law, was kind enough to allow me to come over there, drink out of the cup as part of its victory tour. There's 2 keepers of the cup that go around. There's, oh goodness, Pritchard. Phil Pritchard, who is the original and the oldest guy. Jack got Mike Bolt, who's a little bit younger, and they say he's the guy you want to get, a little bit younger, a little cooler, because they never let the cup out of their sight. If it's ever picked up, it's picked up by the keeper of the cup or by the player or manager or, coach, whoever it was who won it. And so, Jack serving beers to people out of the cup all night, me being one of them, really great time. And, I'll probably throw in a video here to get a chance. Ready? Let's go.
Giant W. The slurp of a champion. Slurp of a champion.
I've heard that slurp before.
That's so good. I got the fucking shirt on. We're good. I have the sweater on. We're good.
That's called a jersey.
It's not a shirt, it's a sweater.
What's that?
I don't know if you're familiar. That's a jersey.
I got the sweater on. In the summer. To watch. Really enjoy it. So that's some pretty good stuff as well with the Cup. But sitting there talking to Mike and all the things that he had, the stories, the white gloves that he has, taking this thing all around the world. It was its last night that was going to be in the United States. And then I think he said he was heading off to Europe for some of the European tour that he would have to do. But all the sacrifices he's made, he goes, being the keeper of the Cup for the last 23 years, he goes, I'm basically on the road 200 days a year. It's cost me a lot of girlfriends, a lot of relationships. Going through there, he's like, sweetie, she was at a friend's house and she's like, I'm going to stay here. I mean, it's a pretty big deal. Your dad can get you into a lot of stuff, can pull a lot of strings to get things done. I don't think I can ever get you, I promise you can do this again. And she's like, I know, I understand. I'm good. I said, all right. And she goes, tell Mr. Johnson, good job. I'm like, I know he appreciates that from 11-year-old girl. Tell him good job, even though she can't be there to support the party. I don't know what she thought it was. I'm like, it's much about everybody else that's there. Obviously they're congratulating Jack, but it was obviously a huge day and very, very cool and really sweet to kind of deal with. So that was an awesome time for me this weekend and so many other guys. I mean, I think Jack had half of the northwest side of Columbus there, and he probably knew about a third of the people, but he's just such a generous guy. And so it was a really cool thing. First time the Cup had ever been in Columbus, Ohio, as part of a victory tour. It had come for all-star games and different things like that. But the Jackets have never won it. And Jack Johnson is currently the only player who has won it, who was residing in Columbus and wanted to come back home. So doing something pretty great for the city right there. And it was a huge deal with it coming to town. Some football news, professional football news, franchise tag deadline to get long-term deals. Came and went. Orlando Brown Jr. with the Chiefs, he was traded over from Baltimore. They offered to make him the highest paid lineman. But throw that up there. Final offer, 6-year, $139 million deal, 30 some at signing. I think, a boatload, almost more than half of that was guaranteed on the entire contract. Really, it was a good deal, but he's going to roll the dice and go in and play on his franchise tag. And they're still going to be in communication. And I think that this wasn't hostile. It was something that was done, obviously, and they had a good discourse because the final offer came out. There wasn't a lot of things that were leaking throughout the negotiations. And whenever that's the case, I think that shows that, hey, things are going pretty well. But he's going to be playing on the franchise tag. Jesse Bates for Cincinnati, the Bengals, he's going to be playing on a franchise tag. He's talking about not reporting during training camp. Not that it'd normally be expensive, but he's not under contract. So that's what's going to be different for him. I believe the safety franchise tag is somewhere around $13 million. And so he probably won't come in until the end of camp. And what's interesting with that with guys, when you decide not to sign your franchise tag and you hold out of camp, you're not fined because you're not under contract. The team can always rescind it. Very rarely do they do that. Then you usually sign it, come in, last preseason game, get ready for a week and play. But if you're going into your final year, and I understand weighing it, if you're not going to sign the long-term deal, you want to make sure that you put the best product out there on the field. Now, you don't want to get hurt, but you have to balance that with making sure I got to go out there and play at a franchise level so that someone's going to give me a huge deal next year. Well, Cincinnati's in a situation where they can't pay everybody, just like the Chiefs with Orlando Brown. They're trying to prioritize him, but Cincinnati's going to have Joey Burrow coming up. They're going to have Jamar Chase coming up. They're going to have a lot of dudes, a lot of mouths that they've got to feed. So they probably put a fair offer out, but they couldn't break the bank and bust the market. And frankly, I understand it. And Jesse Bates might understand it as well, but by not coming in and reporting, like, I don't know many guys who do that, who then go on to just have great years. And that's the one thing that kind of worries me a little bit. Like, Jesse Bates played decently well last year, not his best season, played great down the stretch, finishing the year. And then in the playoffs was really good, had some big plays. That's always the balance players are trying to reach. Holding out on the franchise tag, which is actually free for them to do. So you don't ultimately get hurt, which is nice, but juxtapose that, are you getting as ready for the season as possible? So there's a sweet spot of how much you need to play, how much you need to be ready. Should you be at camp and just have them dial your reps back? There's some different ways to do it. Growing the game of football. Troy Vincent came out, talking about potentially trying to push for future Olympics to get football in football in the form of flag football. Now, I think flag football has grown immensely. I think it's helped popularize the game. The NFL now, college football, high school, you throw more than ever. I mean, I would say that it makes it safer. I don't know if passing plays are safer than running plays. You're running full speed, you get hit by other guys. Obviously, they've done the targeting and eliminated that. But I do think putting flag football, if you could get it to the Olympics, it would be a pretty solid sport. And I think it would help grow the game on an international level. Football is the one sport, if you look at it, well, the Super Bowl is widely watched and is consumed in massive amounts in America. Internationally, not really consumed at the rate of baseball, at the rate of hockey, and at the rate of basketball. All of those sports are played at a much higher international scale. NFL's done things to try to initiate football to be played more overseas. NFL Europe, they're trying to get more games over there. I think the Germans like it. Most Northern Europeans are more fans of it than maybe some in the Southern region, maybe even some of the Brits. But this is the way I think you can get people exposed to it on a smaller level. It's easier to understand. You don't have as many players out there. And frankly, like you start looking at rugby, there's a bunch of different versions and models. Like there are other sports, they have watered down I say watered down, meaning less than whole versions of their game that usually they can play. And so I think that that's a good thing. I think the NFL is doing something smart there, and I really like it. And when that came up, I'm like, you know what? I really wasn't necessarily a fan at first, but I go, it'll get kids all over the world to kind of watch, maybe get intrigued, see what it's all about. Like you start playing that, and then maybe you progress into tackle football. And it's not an overnight play. This is a 20-year play that the NFL is ultimately working on. But I do think it's something that could really help a lot. It could really work in a big way to be able to grow the game on a global scale. Because locally, NFL's good, man. We got all the info we need. We got all of the demographics. We're growing this thing, men, women, children. Everybody is consuming football at a massive rate. That's why Apple Plus is probably going to pay close to $3 billion for the Sunday ticket rights, which were held by DirecTV for, it seems like 20 years. And so, $3 billion annually per season. You get to 3.2 billion. That's $100 million a team. I mean, I'm not great at math, but that's a heck of a lot of cash just for that. That's not even local television revenue. And the games that are on more broadcast TV doesn't include the Thursday night stream or anything else. So that's why the NFL, I mean, they want to grow that thing to a $25 billion a year enterprise, and they're well on their way to getting a chance to do that. Now, some college football stuff. And a lot of these stories are intertwined. It's been media days. Big 12's had theirs, SEC's in the middle of theirs. You're looking forward, ACC, Big 10 next week. A lot of stuff ultimately going on. Greg Sankey came out, the commissioner, talked about potentially a 10-game schedule, conference schedule. A lot of these teams, they all won at least 7 home games. And so they're going to have to get creative with how that'll ultimately look. If you start going to this model where, you're losing potentially a home game. And it used to be where you would have 7 home games one year, 8 the next, with a big, usually home and home, probably think 8 conference games, 4 of those are at home. And you have 4 other games, usually playing a couple of smaller opponents, mid-majors, pay them to come play. Then you have your big non-conference game, which some years is neutral, some years is a home, some you're on the road, but generally every other year you're going to have 8 home games and 7. Big 10 went to 9 conference games. That knocks you back down to just 7 and 7 a year, because you're going to usually rotate that non-conference away game when you have a conference home game to make sure that you're never in a situation where you have 8 one year and 6 the next. But 10 games, when you get these mega conferences, I think that's what you're going to need to have, because you're probably going to have to play an 8-game conference slate within your division of the conference, and then maybe 7, I don't know, but then to have crossover games will be big. And those are going to be massive games. Those are conference games that TV partners like, because there's a lot of passion behind them. They draw big numbers and people want to tune in and watch. So I was never a fan of more conference games. I'll never want to exclusively see them, but I think that this is the way that it needs to go. And the Big 10 going to 9, they've looked at dropping it back to 8. But I think 9 conference games, maybe even 10 one day with just 2 non-conference things. And, when there's only 2 or 3 conferences, what do? You play one big one and then maybe one more mid-majors conference, kind of pull them in, and that's kind of where it is. I think that's probably the solution and maybe the model. You always have to remember, people float these things out there with intent. Greg Sankey is a smart guy. He's not saying something about 10 conference games for no reason at all. He's putting it out there because he wants people to think about it, start talking about it, start warming the room to the idea if there's people who are staunchly opposed to it. So with that, looking at some growing of the conferences, and I'm going to throw this up here. California Governor Gavin Newsome is going to look into legally blocking UCLA from joining the Big Ten, reportedly. And this is what I tell people. There's always the reason why these conference migrations and shifts don't happen overnight, because it takes time and there's processes. You have to talk to the ADs, the presidents. They have to go to their board. Their board has to sit down, look at their bylaws, figure out how to ultimately do this. Is there something within their government charter, if it's a public school, that prohibits them from leaving? And so when you do it quickly, sometimes you overlook some things. Now, I think Gavin Newsom has no business getting involved with this. He's the governor of California. And so, yeah, I guess there's an obligation when you start talking about the California schools, you start pulling in Berkeley and everybody else. And what does that do to the system that they ultimately have and their ability then to operate and function? You have some of them starting to leave the Pac-12, maybe good for one, but terrible for another, as we'll probably see. But this is why you usually go a little slower, because of that. And so now Gavin Newsom is digging in on this, trying to see if he can prevent this from happening. Frankly, they got a lot bigger problems in California. They got homelessness all over the place. They've got skyrocketing fuel prices. They've got break-ins. They've got all kinds of things that are going on in that state. And so by him digging into this, like, dude, go spend your time on something probably a little bit bigger. There's a lot of things out there that need to get worked on other than sports. That's why you have a president. That's why you have a board there. That's why you ultimately have an AD and all these people who are making decisions. And the reality is, Gavin, UCLA is in $100 million in debt in their athletic department. So unless you're going to bail that out, they need this to be financially solvent. They need that money to come in and that fund infusion from the Big Ten to be able to have success. Now, with that, there's a little bit of NIL news. And so Lane Kiffen, I'm going to throw his comments out here, talking about NIL at Media Day and what it ultimately means. And, who's going to win? Who will be the ultimate winners in NIL with NIL? Let's take a listen.
Well, the first question is the keys to NIL and how do you do well at that? You have really good boosters. That's how you do well at it. So I'll say what other people don't say, as you know. So it's like a payroll, in baseball. What teams win over a long period of time? Teams that have high payrolls and can pay players a lot. So we're in a situation not any different than that, which is what I'm not saying I'm sure other people said it. I said it day one, you legalize cheating, and so get ready for the people that have the most money to get the best players. And now you have it. So it is what it is. And as far as a general manager to manage that, we aren't allowed in the current system to manage what they make. So we're not there yet. And I don't know that we ever will be. That's just what I said it should be, because that's what any other professional sports, which is what we are now, does.
Some pretty big stuff right there. And I think he's been saying that the whole time, and he has. And people want to talk about it, like maybe they don't agree with it, but what he's saying is pretty darn true. The fact that the schools with the most money, the best boosters, they're going to be the ones that are having the most success. And if you look at recruiting rankings now, where they're at, where people are projecting them to finish, it's going to really be the same people at the top. That's why I don't know why Lane's getting that upset. They can only bring in so many guys, but you're going to have your A&Ms, your Alabamas, your Texases, your Ohio States, your Georgias. Like, that's going to be the top of the recruiting rankings. That's how it's kind of been for a while. And now A&M's crept up there recently, and they're spending a lot of money on this, and everybody gets that. But, what are you supposed to have them do? Now, we'll get into NIL a lot more and some of the stuff that's happening at Texas Tech and some of the things that Ohio State's doing, in the next episode here, as we're getting a little long, but coaches are going to complain about this. They're going to dive into it. And I don't know what they expect to be done. I think they want some sort of governance. I think they probably want it capped. They probably want some sort of, TV revenue share with the players, which I believe is ultimately going to happen. And in doing that, and you have that agreement, whether it's a collectively bargained agreement with a union, it can just be, a working group, and saying, hey, you're going to get this share of the revenue from the playoffs. All the players then will get paid. Then we can kind of regulate it a little bit more. And we don't need to start just these collectives, because all these players will be getting paid ultimately to come in. And so maybe you can do something to kind of prevent the collectives and everything that's happening. I don't know, but they do need to figure this out. And the fact that Lane is that honest, talking about that at SEC Media Days, as commissioner speaking, Nick Saban's going to speak, Kirby Smart, there's some big hitters down there. Big hitters, and he was that honest to kind of dump that out. Like, a lot of people don't like Lane, and I'm not always a fan of everything he does, but he trolls a lot, but he does speak a lot of truth. And I think he just wants to see some governance and ultimately some oversight about how this thing is going to run. But the only way you can get governance is with oversight. And you can then probably get more money to all the players through TV dollars with a revenue split when they expand the CFP. But you're going to have to figure out a way to do that. You're going to need to get all the commissioners on board, and you're at least going to have somebody who's a champion of it and a driver of it, someone who cares enough about college football to say, hey, I'll handle all this. It may not be necessarily best for my university, for my school, for my conference, but we need to figure out a way to get this done so that we can have a surviving business model that operates into the near future, where I understand there's never been a ton of parity in college football, but there's more concentration of power at the top. I don't know if that makes it better. I think it kind of wears on people. They want to see some new matchups. And just like watching the Bengals in the Super Bowl last year, it was great for the NFL because it's new blood getting a bite at it. So it's new and interesting, and people really like it. Well, that's all for this edition of Carps Corner. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Do whatever you need to do. Thank you so much. Until next time, I'll see you soon.